Reuters have apprised us that they will be following shortly. So with that, the public hearing of the Committee on Foreign Relations is hereby called to order. And the previous meeting having merely been suspended, we shall proceed even without a quorum and dispense with that requirement. Let's call on Attorney Dana Alberto, our Legislative Committee Secretary, to acknowledge the presence of our resource persons, guests, and others. Thank you.
Good morning. The Committee on Foreign Relations would like to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests, namely, from the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have Secretary Enrique A. Manalo, Ambassador Jose Manuel Babe G. Romualdez, Assistant Secretary Jose Victor Chan Gonzaga, Assistant Secretary Marshal Louis M. Alferez.
If you don't mind, there are quite a few people in the room. Please raise your right hand so that you identify yourself. Salamat. Yes, Asek Alferez. Thank you.
Assistant Secretary Eileen Mendiola Rao. Assistant Secretary Ariel R. Peñaranda.
Sorry, who's that? Oh, please take your seat, please. Yes.
Okay.
There are quite a few chairs still available. Okay. Please proceed.
From the Department of National Defense, we have Secretary Gilberto C. Teodoro Jr., Senior Undersecretary Ireneo C. Espino, Undersecretary Ignacio B. Madriaga. Okay. From the National Security Council, National Task Force, West Philippine Sea, we have Deputy Director General Nestor C. Erico. From the Department of Justice, we have Attorney Freddy G. Ganchon.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Okay. From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have General Romeo S. Bronner, Jr., PA. Okay. VADM Torribo D. Adasi, Jr., PN. Okay. MGen Ferdinand T. Barandon, PA. From the Department of Health, we have Assistant Secretary Maylene Beltran, Director Laura Angelia
I'm sorry,
Saison.
can we go back a little bit? There's Admiral Roy Vicente Trinidad. Is he here? Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, sorry. I didn't see you. Okay, yes, Department of Health, Asek Beltran.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Director Laura Angelia Saison, Director Arnold G. Alindada, Undersecretary Maria Rosario Singh Vergeri. From the Philippine Coast Guard, we have CG ADM Ronnie Gil Gavan.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
From the
Yes.
National Maritime Council, we have Captain Armil Angeles PN.
Thank you.
We have also Mr. Vince Dizon.
I'm sorry? Vince, okay. What's your position and who are you representing this morning?
Invited me,
Yes, as the vaccine czar.
well, as deputy to Secretary Galvez at that time.
Okay,
Opo.
thank you.
Okay. We also have virtual presence of Professor Jonathan Ong
Thank you. I see you.
and Dr. Daniel R. Lucy, MD.
Thank you very
Okay.
much, Dr. Lucy.
Yes. That will be all, Madam Chair.
You also have indicated the ICT Director Reyes. Dana, you also indicated the ICT Director Reyes. I don't think they've been called. NBI Law Talk and CICC USEC Alex Ramos. Are you here? They aren't here. Yeah, they're highlighted. So there's no one from the cyber or ICT community? Yes.
Director
Director
Jose
Reyes, oh, you're
Carlos
here.
P.
Okay.
Reyes.
Pero wala rito si NBI Law Talk? Wala ring
No.
si CICC, si Alex Ramos?
Wala po.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, all right. Any of the stakeholders that need to be here? Vince, you're the only one, Professor Jonathan Ong, and Dr. Lucy. Thank you. We're done with that acknowledgement. Pursuant to Section 2 of the Rules of Procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation, granting the Senate committee the power to initiate inquiries if the matter is within the committee's purview, the Committee on Foreign Relations hereby calls this inquiry in aid of legislation on the following issues. First, given the difference in the time zone, we start with the alleged anti-vaccine propaganda by the military of the United States of America during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thereafter, the Ayungin Shoal incident on 17 June, resulting in injuries to the Philippine Navy personnel, and such other matters as may be related to vaccines, rotation and reprovisioning, and other cyber attacks and hacking that have been alleged. The so-called great power competition is reaching a boiling point, and unfortunately, our country and our people are already starting to pay dearly because of it. In today's hearing, the committee will attempt to examine how both sides in this emerging new Cold War have manipulated to a certain degree our country and many of the information channels, putting people at risk and threatening the survival of the nation in many cases. Last June 14, Reuters reported a deliberate and clandestine anti-vaccination operation by the military of the United States to discredit China's Sinovac vaccines as a response to Beijing's efforts to blame the U.S. for the pandemic. It was alleged that the anti-vaccine effort was undertaken by the U.S. military and was designed to counter China's growing influence in the Philippines and other developing countries. The Reuters article mentioned that the campaign was conducted through fake internet accounts meant to impersonate Filipinos. And they identified at least 300 accounts on X, formerly Twitter, likely used for anti-vaccination campaigns. And these accounts were all created in the summer of 2020, centering on the slogan, #China ang virus. We must verify if the anti-vaccination and misinformation campaign was indeed orchestrated by the U.S. military. If verified, there is also a need to further determine the ramifications of the action of the U.S. military, any potential breach of international law, and any possible legal recourse available to the Philippines, considering that such anti-vaccination and misinformation campaigns threaten national security and, more importantly, the health of Filipinos. The next issue focuses on the incident last June 17, wherein a Philippine Navy sailor was seriously injured after Chinese vessels intercepted a resupply mission to BRP Sierra Madre. This incident marks a serious escalation in the aggressiveness of the People's Republic of China in intercepting Philippine rotation and resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal. And for the first time, Chinese personnel boarded Filipino military boats, took Filipino firearms, and seriously injured Filipino military personnel. This escalation took place despite the current strategies being employed by Philippine authorities, including the filing of diplomatic protests, the transparency campaign on rotation and resupply, the joint patrols being undertaken by the U.S. and other Filipino allies. There is a need, therefore, to further examine the events that took place on June 17 in order to determine how the government can better protect Filipino servicemen and citizens during rotation and resupply to Ayungin, and to ascertain the changes that should be made to current strategies employed by Philippine government in order to allow the country to more effectively and safely assert our sovereign rights. And with that, may the committee secretary therefore administer the oath to our resource persons so that we can begin.
Kindly stand and raise your right hand. Even those who are virtually present, please. I state your name. Do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this proceeding. Thank you. You may sit down.
Yes, I'd like to begin with the statement derived from the Pentagon regarding the Reuters article The Department of Defense, and this refers to the U.S. Department of Defense, conducts a wide range of operations, including operations of information environment, OIE, to counter adversary malign influence, DOD activities, including OIE, conducted outside areas of armed conflict. They are coordinated and deconflicted with other departments and agencies as appropriate. This process is deliberate, methodical, comprehensive, and several state and non-state actors use social media platforms and other media to spread disinformation and conduct malign influence campaigns against the U.S. The Department of Defense uses a variety of platforms, including social media, to counter malign influence attacks aimed at the U.S. allies and partners. As it relates to COVID-19 disinformation, China initiated a disinformation campaign to falsely blame the U.S. for the spread of COVID-19. And that's the U.S. Department of Defense statement following the article that appeared in Reuters. There is also a statement that was made public, and we are in receipt of as well, from the Chinese embassy in the Philippines regarding the U.S. military's secret psychological warfare of discrediting Chinese vaccines. And I would just like to quickly summarize the rather lengthy statement from China's embassy here in Manila. As a responsible major country, China provided global public goods such as vaccines to other countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. We were the first to provide COVID response supplies and vaccines to the Philippines. China and the Philippines have been mutually supportive and cooperative against the onslaught of the disease, making important contributions to the world's final victory over the pandemic. However, such cooperation was not as smooth as it was supposed to be. Obstruction and sabotage from a third country and certain forces happened all along. And this goes on to say that a plot doomed to failure as it went against the interests of both the Chinese and the Filipino people. More and more behind-the-scenes stories were being told by insiders following the end of the pandemic. And the above report, meaning the Reuters report, is one of the latest that connects the dots and tells a true story to the world. People around the world are indignant about the U.S. military's actions, laying bare the hypocrisy, malign intent, and double standards of the U.S. While talking about respecting human rights, the U.S. does the opposite regarding the fundamental human rights of life and death of Filipino people, thus exploiting the vulnerability of the Filipino people for its ulterior geopolitical motives. Yes, so they go on to warn that both the people of China as well as the Philippines should remain highly vigilant and clear-eyed, resist being taken in by disinformation and inflammatory rhetoric, define their own fate, and protect China-Philippine relations, as well as peace and stability in the South Seas. So we shall begin with the Twitter posts. Please put them on, to which we refer. Yes, Secretary, please, if we may have the Twitter post to which we are referring, and so that everyone can have a look at them. Okay, I think most people can see it's a little bit far. Pwedeng lakihan. Yes, Dr. Daniel Lucy. Yes, Dr. Lucy, I see you. Yes,
Yes,
there.
hello, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Lucy. We start off with you, since you were one of the persons interviewed by the Reuters team, and you were a former military physician who assisted in the response to the 2001 anthrax attacks, as well as being an infectious disease specialist at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine. So thank you very much for joining us. How were you interviewed by Reuters? Did they reach out to you personally, or was it through email or by phone?
They reached out to me. Honestly, I don't remember if there was a phone call or not, but yes, they reached out to me and asked me what I thought. I would just like to add, Senator, that I served in the U.S. Air Force only from 1988 to 1992 for 4 years. So the reference to my work during 2001 anthrax attacks in the U.S., I was a civilian physician, infectious disease physician at that time. I just wanted to clarify that I served 4 years on active duty from 1988 to 1992.
Yes, thank you for the clarification, Doctor. What were the questions asked by the Reuters team? Were you made aware that the interview was for an expose regarding clandestine information operations?
Well, I think that the Reuters interviewer was quite straightforward and factual, so I don't feel that there was any deception. He explained to me what the story was going to say and asked me if I had any reaction. And so, you know, I gave the statement that you find in the Reuters story from June 14th, because as an infectious disease physician, someone who's been involved with many epidemics starting in 1982 with the AIDS epidemic in the US, but going to China for SARS in 2003, for example, and actually, I went to China in February of 2020, but I was trying to get to Wuhan to help work in the hospitals in Wuhan, but I was not able to get there. I only got as far as Shanghai because Wuhan was already shut down, I think, as everyone knows, on January 23rd.
Thank you. Yes, so you said that they were fairly straightforward, and you were thereafter quoted by Reuters as saying, the effort to stoke fear about Chinese inoculations risked undermining overall public trust in government health initiatives. Can you explain your statement briefly?
I think my statement was more to the effect of that I did not think that what was being reported, if accurate, that it was defensible. I really didn't think that it was something that you know the U.S. government should have been doing. The Chinese Sinovac vaccine, I think, as everyone knows, did have safety and efficacy data published in peer-reviewed journals, and it was one of multiple vaccines that was approved for use by the World Health Organization. So I really didn't think that it was ethically, it was defensible to, if accurate, to have a disinformation program about this vaccine, which was made available obviously to the Philippines and to other countries as well by China.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Indeed, Sinovac was the first vaccine made available during the pandemic here in the Philippines. Do these types of disinformation and misinformation campaigns cause what is called vaccine hesitancy for those who are affected thereby?
Well, I can't speak directly for anyone, obviously, in the Philippines or in Central Asia or anywhere else in the world. But I think this was really disinformation. And I'm saying this, as an infectious disease physician. I'm a U.S. citizen. I, grew up in a military family. I served in active duty. But I think that the way it sounds to me is this disinformation about the Chinese Sinovac vaccine, which again was approved by the World Health Organization for use in countries around the world. It was well, the disinformation was, it sounds to me, to have been intended to make people hesitant to take the vaccine.
Yes, that certainly had that effect here in the Philippines. And until today, we're struggling with vaccine hesitancy for many other vaccines. In your experience as an infectious disease specialist, how significant a problem is vaccine hesitancy?
Well, I think that it's a significant problem in many countries. I can really only speak, to my own country, and certainly there was some vaccine hesitancy before COVID and before any COVID vaccines, but I think that it's probably been increased or amplified because of the controversies about COVID vaccines. And I'm speaking only for my own country, from my own experience in my own country. But clearly, before COVID, there was vaccine hesitancy, or even certain people in certain countries. And again, I'm talking about the United States, but certainly also some countries in Europe that I'm well aware of before COVID, where there were individuals who did not want to take certain vaccines, or in some cases, any vaccines at all. So vaccine hesitancy is a significant problem, but it began before COVID. And at least in my country, in the USA, I think that vaccine hesitancy has increased, and not only for COVID, increased during COVID, and not only for COVID vaccines, but in some instances for other vaccines as well.
Yes, Dr. Lucy, that's certainly been our experience in the Philippines as well, sadly. Thank you very much for your participation and your reiteration that if indeed the report cited is accurate, it is not defensible in any way and would be ethically wrong. Thank you, Dr. Lucy.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. I also would like to have had the participation of Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, in order to discuss the alleged takedown of several hundred posts clearly identified as part of the U.S. military operation. However, there doesn't seem to be any representative present. Committee Secretary, is that correct? Yes, we invited both Meta as well as X. May I know if we've heard from them at all?
We invited them, Senator Marcos, we invited them, Your Honor.
Yes, I understand we invited
but
them,
they,
have they responded in any way?
They responded. I was able to talk to the General Counsel. She was on maternity leave. She is on maternity leave, and she told me to send an email to another person, but at the same time it bounced back, right? The email bounced back.
Okay, so we don't seem to have any reply from both Facebook and X. However, we have a reiteration from the lawyer of Reuters, a certain Christopher G. Lee, who says that as described in the news report, the U.S. military's influence program was global in nature, targeting countries across Central Asia, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. In relation to the Philippines, the U.S. military in 2020 and 2021 operated the clandestine propaganda campaign using phony internet accounts meant to impersonate Filipinos. In connection with that reporting, our newsroom independently identified at least 300 accounts on X, formerly Twitter, that matched descriptions shared by former military officials familiar with the Philippine operation. Almost all were created in the summer of 2020, and after Reuters brought this cluster of accounts to the attention of X in the course of our reporting, X determined that the accounts were inauthentic and suspended them in 2023. Posts by the accounts decry the quality, efficacy, and safety of Chinese face masks, COVID-19 test kits, as well as their vaccines. I think that is all we have with regard to that in the absence of both Meta and X. However, I think the article speaks for itself, wherein it indeed states that the patterns and the activities clearly indicate the participation of the U.S. military as well as the IP addresses. Now we turn to the Philippine government agencies, particularly those involved in the vaccination and cybersecurity program. Were you aware in the late 2020 period to the first half of 2021 that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of social media accounts intended to malign or discredit not only Sinovac, but Chinese face masks and other equipment? Is anyone aware of such social media accounts? Was there any activity reported to you in DOH? Perhaps Mr. Dizon now, who was also involved at least later on. May nabalitaan ba kayo na may ganitong pangyayari? Na may nagsasabi kahit unang-una yung Sinovac ay hindi maaasahan at pati yung mga face mask, pati yung mga ginagamit na PPE at ibang equipment ay hindi maaasahan. Yes, Yusek po?
Yes, good morning po, Madam Chair. Yes po, we have been monitoring this kind of social media issues where there was this kind of issues raised by the people or population, and we tried to address this by doing some form of directed town halls and assembly so that we can better inform our citizens.
So Yusek, you were actually aware that there were posts, tweets, other misinformation over social media and other media here in the Philippines. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And the DOH action was to make people aware through different town halls and other media as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Did you not find these alarming, these tweets and posts? And beyond the town halls, was there any other action taken to stop these accounts and posts that were clearly undermining the effort of DOH at the time?
Yes, Madam Chair. We usually get this kind of issues not just for COVID, but even before the COVID pandemic started, because we had already these kind of issues regarding vaccines since 2016. So we tried addressing this.
By 2016, are you referring to Denvaxia po?
Yes, Madam Chair.
So mula pa nung Denvaxia, nagkakaroon na kayo ng problemang ganito, kaya medyo pamilyar na kayo.
Yes, Madam Chair.
At ang panlaban ninyo, naglalabas kayo ng impormasyon na tama.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Did you find it alarming?
During that time, Madam Chair, yes, because we were trying to have all our population vaccinated. So we really needed to intensify our efforts. So we also had some communication with the Facebook or Meta so that they will take down these different posts, because we do social listening 24/7 so that
Did
we
they?
can monitor. Yes, some of the posts were taken
Some
down.
of the posts were actually taken down. We recognize the arrival of Senator Padilla. As I recall, the frustration of then President Duterte was such that he threatened to arrest people who wouldn't get vaccinated because we had such meager numbers. Tama po ba yun? Ganun kahirap magpa-vaccinate, magpa-bakuna nung panahon na yun?
Madam Chair, I would just like to also clarify, no, although yes, there was this hesitancy during that time, but the hesitancy rate declined throughout the months that we were vaccinating. It started off that there was this high hesitancy rate, but came January of 2022, the hesitancy went down to just 8% among the population.
Tama, tama. I recall that development, and DOH was very successful in convincing people, but that is a 6-month lag. That's really quite a long lag. So they did stop the accounts, or at least take down some of the few that you identified. And Do you still see this sort of thing happening? I understand that with pertussis and whooping cough, it derives from hesitancy from the moms from the usual DPT and other vaccines.
Well, Madam Chair, for now, currently, we are doing currently longitudinal study to determine the hesitancy of Filipinos in terms of our vaccination. And based on our study during the second quarter of 2023 and the fourth quarter of 2023, we now have around from 88% to 91% vaccine belief, or the confidence in vaccines are back.
Thank you. Did you sense that this disinformation was centralized or being controlled by a single force, or did it seem random?
For us, Madam Chair, honestly, we were not aware of this kind of issues. We thought it was just random.
Thank you very much, Yusek Verheere. That's very helpful that you, in fact, already realized that something was up with disinformation. Does Senator Padilla like to make a statement?
A'udhu billahi minasyaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, ma'am. Isang magandang
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
amin. Magandang umaga po sa lahat ng ating mga bisita. Isa pong napaka makasaysayang pagdinig, mahal na Senadora. Papakinggan ko po ang inyong pangbungad na salita. Ako po ay napakasarap pong madinig at magmumula po sa inyo. Kayo lamang po sa inyong English pa lamang ako po ay talagang pagkakabanggit nyo nung Cold War. Talagang yun po napakagandang ating namnamin sapagkat mula po sa inyong talumpati. Kaya po sana mamaya kung inyo pong mamarapatin, ay hihingi po ako ng maiksing suspension lang. Opo. Mamaya po, ma'am. Later. Maraming salamat po. Opo.
Maraming salamat at ganyan talaga yung seatmate ko. Okay, the next issue is whether the U.S. military was behind these posts and tweets discrediting Chinese vaccines and other medical equipment. Unfortunately, we cannot compel a branch of the department, a co-equal state, to testify before the committee. Nonetheless, it's very clear in the Pentagon statement in response to the expose by Reuters, and you will have that, I think, already displayed on screen, please, the Pentagon statement. And I think the DFA personnel who are here present will stand by me that, in fact, persons well-versed in interpreting statements of other states, such as the DFA, all here, as well as the government lawyers who are always responding to similar news. Do you agree that the observation of the news outlets that the above statement is not in any way a denial? It does not deny the material assertions of the Reuters expose. In fact, there are those who would say that this is tantamount to an admission from the U.S. Department of Defense. Is there anyone who'd like to reply as to the nature of the Department of Defense statement? On its face, as we read it, by the grounds of international law. DFA legal, perhaps you can help us here. That they undertake a wide range of operations. Is that correct? Yes, I think that's clear. I mean, they assert that they use a variety of platforms, including social media, in order to counter malign influence against the United States. Certainly a right of every state to defend itself. Any thoughts? Yes, any lawyers from DFA or DND who are familiar with this sort of statement? It's certainly not a denial. Are we agreed?
neither a confirmation, Madam Chair, nor a denial.
Yes, it's neither a confirmation or denial. However, we are also fully aware that if there are serious or unfounded allegations, for example, against the AFP, the DND will categorically deny the same. Isn't it so? Dito sa atin, kapag nagkaroon ng turuan na ganyang kalubha, ganyang kaseryoso, ganyang katindi, hindi ba talaga ay mag-uunahan pa tayo para i-deny? Kasi nakakasira naman ng ating institusyon, hindi po ba? Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Senator. Just to, on this particular statement, I think if we, judging and following from the final sentence, I think it's a declaration of perhaps a U.S. policy that they would be undertaking deterrence against any kind of malign influence against them.
Tama naman. Siyempre, pagtatanggol rin ang sarili
I
nila.
think yan ang ibig sabihin. No?
Oo naman. Tayo rin, di ba? Ganon
Same
din
thing.
naman.
Same
Pag inakusahan ng mali, siyempre, itatanggi naman natin, ano? So, is it a reasonable assumption that the U.S. military did not deny what was written in the Reuters article? Because the same is true? Is that what we assume, since there is no vehement denial typical of the military institutions worldwide? Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can only repeat what Secretary Teodoro said. I think it's neither a denial or an assertion of...
Secretary Teodoro, you'd like to speak for yourself?
No, Mama, if it's neither a confirmation nor a denial, then the burden of proof is on the asserter to prove something. So that means to say that the US DOD will neither confirm nor deny. Somebody has evidence, come out and prove it. I think that's the import of the statement.
Yes, that's correct. Neither a confirmation or a denial. But why would you not deny something if it was not true?
I think, ma'am,
Surely
that's,
jump into the fray and knock them dead.
I really can't speak for them. I think that's long-term policy that they neither confirm nor deny several things.
I've read in the very recent past very vehement denials from the U.S. DND. They are certainly not hesitant about lambasting people who accuse them of what they believe are wrongful and inaccurate things.
As I said, ma'am, I can't really speak for them, Your Honor.
That's right. Neither can we, although, of course, some news outlets view the Pentagon statement not just merely a lack of denial, but an actual admission of the veracity of the Reuters, as it is the habit, indeed, of military institutions to deny immediately wrongful accusations. In our legal procedure, is it not that an assertion not denied is therefore deemed admitted?
It depends. If the assertion calls for a denial, the characterization that...
This certainly calls for a denial because it has very, very serious ethical ramifications already mentioned by Dr. Lucy.
Well, probably they can invoke matters of national security on that matter, but it's in a legal proceeding that when an assertion calls for a denial, then it can be laid down in evidence that the non-denial, if the nature of the question would call in the normal course of things, if I remember my evidence right, and it is not denied, then it can be submitted in evidence that such was an implied admission.
Yes,
in a legal proceeding.
I understand that a legal proceeding would be required, but it is, of course, even in a legal proceeding, even under the rules of Philippine evidence, clear that an assertion that is not denied will have to be deemed admitted. Certainly one such so important as this one. Any instinct from the AFP and the DND? Why was the U.S. DND so cagey with neither an admission nor a denial? Wouldn't you deny it immediately when someone accuses you of such an evil, wicked, dangerous, unethical campaign? Nakangiti kayo, kaya sasabihin ko na umuo na kayo. O
Yeah,
siya.
ma'am. In ours, because we belong to a different set of rules, we will deny, naturally, any
Yes.
assertion that will affect the integrity of the institution, any false assertion, any malpropaganda, malign influence, we will immediately deny it. But that's us.
Perhaps all military institutions will be more or less similar. In any
Ma'am,
case,
Philippine soldiers do not lie.
there we go.
Look, ma'am,
And all their wives will come forward to prove it.
yes, ma'am, I can assure
Thank
you
you.
about that,
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so we next call upon Professor Jonathan Ong, who's very kindly online, who authored the article, The Contagion of Stigmatization, Racism and Discrimination in the Infodemic Moment. During the pandemic, were you able to see these controversial tweets and posts in social media, which malign Chinese-made vaccines and protective equipment? Can you describe the posts and tweets that you mentioned? Dr. Ong, I see you.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me. Yes, this was a subject of a joint paper that myself and Dr. Gideon Lasco had authored for several portals, including the LSE blog. So these posts, we could only assume were misinformation. So ang assumption po namin ay ito ay mga sabi-sabi lang or haka-haka lang ng mga tao online. We did not know that some of these posts were actually intentionally misleading. And I think that's what is so alarming about the Reuters investigation. They gave very specific examples of the posts and memes that contained hashtags that were directly aligned and directed by the US military. And ang strategy po dito ay to prey on existing anti-China sentiments. So preying on stereotypes that people might have about certain goods or items that are defective. So ito po ay ginagamit and wini-weaponize to stoke public's existing fears and anxieties at a time of incredible tragedy, and people were very afraid. So ito po ginamit, and that's what the Reuters investigation was asserting. To actually weaponize people's existing fears and anxieties. And this is very effective in getting people in a very fearful and panicked state. And once you're in that kind of state, you're more manipulable and prone to believing certain kinds of information. And that is why this needs further probing and investigation. And I think the Reuters report was very shocking, not only in giving very specific examples of these posts, but also telling us na nagkaroon ng conflict behind the scenes within the US military and the State Department between people who were justifying the campaign and people who were actually against the use of the campaign. And that's what we need to further investigate.
Thank you very much, Professor Ong. Magkapareho kayo ng DOH. Nakikita ninyo yung tweets and yung posts, pero hindi ninyo alam kung saan galing. Hindi rin ninyo alam kung may talagang nagmamaniobra na, kumbaga, centralized. But I would like to ask, what do you suspect was the objective of these posts?
So, so it's interesting that it's not just the Philippines that was the target country. It was several countries in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. So these are regions in which the US has very clear geopolitical interests, and they want to consolidate support within these countries, while China is obviously trying to win over public sentiment here using vaccine diplomacy. And I think that's what the Reuters investigation was trying to uncover and go into great detail, di ba? Na parang tinatry i-counter
Dr.
itong
Ong,
vaccine.
Professor Ong, sorry.
Opo.
Naniniwala kayo na may disinformation campaign that was managed and concerted by groups interested in the U.S. policy in these very controverted regions?
So I will base it po on the Reuters report, and if you allow me to explain a little further. So the Reuters report was very detailed in identifying people they had interviewed, U.S. Based diplomats and also former military officials who were very critical of the campaign. And I think that's yung power ng story in the Reuters report is they based it off people's testimonies and anonymous testimonies saying that they had actually objected to employing this disinformation campaign in these countries na may military interests ang United States. And so they were able
Yes,
to
Professor,
piece together
I'm
the-
also
the
fully
leadership
aware.
and the accounts.
Oh, sorry. Professor, yes, I know many American citizens as well as government officials who are horrified by the notion that such a campaign was undertaken by the Pentagon. So you feel somehow that this is real, even if you did not observe any systematic proliferation of disinformation.
So I did not have access to that level of data. To be able to access this kind of information, kailangan natin ng verification from social media platforms themselves. And I think that's what the Reuters reporters did. Once they identified the 300 accounts that were guilty of engineering that hashtag, they consulted Twitter, now called X, whether indeed their suspicions were correct, and they verified that. They actually verified that and took down those accounts. But if I may add, Madam Chair, I have additional questions about this kind of reporting. And if I may ask those questions for you to further probe through your office.
Yes, I'm happy to hear them now, or you can submit them confidentially if you don't want to reveal them at this point.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some of these questions now.
Yes, if you can do it very quickly, we have
Okay.
quite a long way to go.
Sige po. So, unang-una, what is striking to me as a disinformation researcher who is very knowledgeable about the kinds of disinformation campaigns, how they are organized behind the scenes, and the quality and the tone in which they are expressed online. It's interesting na yung examples that they gave ng Reuters is translated in the local languages. So, designed siya in Washington, D.C. by the U.S. military, but they are translated in Filipino, but they're also translated around into different countries and made to spread across the countries. We need to ask, therefore, are there possibility of subcontractors that the U.S. military enlisted? And who might those subcontractors be? And where are they located? It is interesting that those posts convey insider jokes, cultural knowledge of what would resonate with local citizens and communities in the Philippines, but also in other countries like Turkmenistan, I think, was one of the other examples. So it's important for us to track down potential in-country collaborators responsible for the translation and dissemination of the campaigns, for us to hold these people into account. Number two would be the activity of social media platforms themselves. If you read very closely the Reuters investigation, it was very interesting that Reuters reported how social media platforms called the U.S. military for a meeting, for a Zoom meeting, to say that they were able to identify these accounts that the U.S. military were using and operating from their base. But did these social media platforms, particularly Facebook, which was identified in the Reuters report, did they communicate this to the Philippines office of Facebook? Did they communicate this to any Philippines government official who they should also be held into account for? So these social media platforms are obviously, their headquarters are in the United States, but they must be
That's correct,
accountable
yes.
to us as well. So I
Yes.
think those are two
They
important
haven't
questions.
even turned up this morning, Professor Ong.
Yeah, and I think those are important questions that an independent body of researchers should be able to get access to, and I think your office should feel empowered to commission an independent, deep investigation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ong. That's very helpful, and those are certainly leads that we need to follow up on. Meanwhile, we go back to the DOH and Vince Dizon, and admitted by us all here. During the first 6 months, there was a very low vaccination rate until the very end of 2021, and the rate at that point was 25%, and we know that President Duterte was irate that he couldn't push it forward, threatening, in fact, imprisonment at one point for those who refused to be vaccinated. To your mind, what were the main reasons, even among very vulnerable sectors manifesting grave comorbidities? Do you manage, in hindsight, to explain why the low hesitancy, despite the fact that people were falling ill and many of us lost relatives in the pandemic? Yes, you're recognized, Vince.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think just to put things in perspective, there were really two main and very serious challenges during the beginning of the vaccination program, which was sometime in the late part of 2020, leading towards 2021. The first one was really the lack of supply. It was very difficult to get supply of any vaccine. No?
Yes, so part of it was a supply issue.
It was a supply
Yes,
issue.
yes,
But
we're all aware of that.
coupled with that was really what Yusek Rosette mentioned, which was really a very strong hesitancy issue on the part of the public. As the surveys at that time showed, it was as low as 25%, not to begin with, meaning only about 25 to 30% were actually willing to take a COVID vaccine. Right. In order to address this, I think upon directions of the president himself at that time, there was really a very, very strong multi-sectoral effort, which included the government agencies as well as the private sector. Sure. In fact, I recall there was a very strong campaign to combat that. And this was really also borne out by a lot of disinformation.
And we continue to be grateful for the participation of the private sector, the SM Group, San Miguel Group, the Razon Group, who all bolted in and showed their civic-mindedness, offering for free so many vaccines. The LGUs were also at the forefront. My question is, during that period of great vaccine hesitancy and intermittent supply, during that more or less 6-month plus period, how many probably died or contracted severe COVID? Do you have any data at all?
Madam Chair, during that time, we started off with, during the second quarter of 2020, that would be...
Come again?
During the second quarter of the year 2020, when the COVID started, we had a total of 33,991 illnesses and 1,936 deaths. At the end of the year 2020, we had a total of 158,404 illnesses and 3,678 deaths.
Okay, this is still 2020. Paano yung 2021? Up to the second quarter, sabihin natin.
Yes, Madam Chair. During 2021, second quarter of 2021, we had a total of 646,760 illnesses and 12,689 deaths.
So it climbed radically.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Tapos, nung katapusan ng 2021, kung kailan talagang nagsimula yung marami na nagpapabakuna, ilan ang nagkasakit at ilan ang namatay?
During the fourth quarter of 2021, only for the fourth quarter, we had a total of 2.
This is not cumulative?
Not cumulative, Madam Chair.
Can we have cumulative?
Okay.
Perhaps if not today, then you can submit it.
Yes, Madam Chair, we will provide
Sige,
that.
sa last quarter lang po.
Sa last quarter lang po ng 2021, we had a total of 298,452 illnesses and 7,878 deaths.
Nung yung third quarter, para maidagdag na lang natin lahat, yung
Yes
third
po.
quarter po.
Third quarter of 2021, we had a total of 1,117,896 illnesses. Just wanted to emphasize, Madam Chair, that during this third quarter, we had the Delta variant.
Yep.
And then the deaths during that time, the third quarter of 2021, was at 21,424.
So, these are shocking numbers. The mortality and morbidity rates are terrible. And this is the period that we refer to and that the Reuters article refers to. Yes, Mr. Vince Dizon, you're
I
raising
just
your
want
hand.
to just very quickly just highlight that very important data point that Yusek Rosette made. I think the 6-month period you're mentioning is really a period between the first quarter of 2020, around February, and towards the third
Pero wala
quarter,
pang
2021, sorry.
Kailan ba nag-umpisa yung bakuna?
2021 po, March 1.
Kaya nga, so,
So-
yung first quarter hindi talaga kasali, second quarter lang
Opo,
pinag-uusapan.
but I think the importance of the first quarter is that this was during the time when the outbreak of the Delta variant started in India, if I'm not mistaken, and it would eventually and inevitably lead
Parang
to
yung Delta was much later in the year.
hindi pa ano po yan, middle of 2021, mga
Yeah,
ganun po.
third quarter.
Opo, mga ganun po. So I think the critical timeline that you mentioned, it's made even more critical because of the Delta variant. Kasi yun po talaga yung, I think, considered the most deadly.
Okay.
That's why we needed to really vaccinate as many and as fast during this period. But unfortunately, because of hesitancy and as shown today, the disinformation that came in during that time,
So
it
you
made
do
it
think
doubly...
so you do think the information had its malign effects?
Oh,
and,
definitely, ma'am.
Truly worked against the Filipino people. The numbers are shocking. We're talking about millions, hundreds of thousands. This is no meager number. This is
No.
much worse than the body count and casualties of war.
Yes, ma'am. That's why I think the president really at that time really expressed a lot of frustration because he knew that it would lead to illnesses and sadly death.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dizon. Yusek, one last question. As a doctor, is this the last question? As a doctor po, is there any valid reason at all why people should be dissuaded from receiving Sinovac shots? I know it's a mere 50+% efficacy, but it's at that time was better than nothing, right?
Madam Chair, first, based on studies, Sinovac prevented 51% of symptoms if you are to receive that, but 100% protection from death and from severe disease of COVID-19. And as a doctor, based on the evidence at hand, wherein the Food and Drug Administration of the Philippines has given its emergency use authority based on safety and efficacy, and also the WHO emergency use listing, Sinovac was included, and based on our experts' recommendations, I will not have that kind of issues regarding this vaccine and will not dissuade people to receive the vaccine.
Thank you very much, Yusek. So we have that on record that there's really no medical reason to object to Sinovac or even the other Chinese vaccines. Kaya lang, kailan ba dumating yung iba, yung iba't ibang Western vaccines, ika nga?
Yes, Madam Chair. During the first quarter also of 2021, after the donation from the Chinese government of Sinovac in the last week of February 2021, AstraZeneca vaccines came, and these were donations coming from the COVAX facility. A total of around 500,000 came.
So that was first quarter of 2021?
Yes, that was first week of March of 2021 where AstraZeneca came. And then the other Western vaccines came around May already, Madam Chair, but only in trickles.
Thank you very much, Yusek. Thank you very much, DOH. Punta muna tayo sa DFA. Having heard the doctors as well as the other specialists, can we ask from the DFA once again that if indeed the U.S. military orchestrated an anti-vax misinformation campaign in the Philippines, did they violate local or international law? Does this action contravene the principle of non-intervention in the International Court of Justice? And even, as some scholars and the New Zealand experts say, that disinformation, which affects public health efforts during a pandemic, is a possible violation of international law with grave consequences. Yes, Secretary Manalo or anyone from the DFA, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that particular question, I don't think I can really give an answer on whether it did violate international law. I suppose.
Well, if we assume
Yeah.
that what was written is in fact accurate, can we say that this violates local or international law, or are we going to say that this is par for the course and accept that this information that causes hundreds of thousands of deaths is acceptable international norm?
Well, Madam Chair, I think we would have to really investigate the
No,
whole
just
issue.
as a matter of law, if this was in fact true, I'm not trying to catch you. If this was in fact true that a disinformation campaign of this magnitude, of this variety was undertaken, wouldn't it violate local and international law? Well,
What?
Dr. Lucy already said that this was clearly unethical if it were true.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, I could pass the floor to our legal advisor because I think this is more of an international legal issue. I have our Assistant Secretary for International.
Yes po. Asek Tejada, is that it?
Tejada.
Yes, po.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Locally, it could any disinformation
Yes,
campaign.
can we speak closer to the mic, please?
Locally, any international, any campaign to discredit, especially an information that concerns health issue, is a matter of national security, of course. Therefore, any country could take issue on this. But
I'm sorry, national security. We're talking about public health.
yes, yes, it is a national security issue.
Yes, I understand, but graver than that, of course, it causes
Yes, yes.
so many, there's widespread death and disease, right?
Indeed, indeed, Madam Chair. Therefore, any attempt to discredit or to sow disinformation for example, in the Philippines,
Sure.
Our national authorities are for sure can take issue on that and can take action.
What action, what legal recourse would we have in the international arena?
You could go either to counter the disinformation as what the health department
No,
has
no,
said.
but that's not an international arena. What legal recourse does the Philippines have? Has the Philippines have? Anong anong magagawa natin? Kasi nangyari na nga to.
Opo.
Paano natin gagawa ng paraan na hindi na mauulit?
Opo. If we are able to identify po kung sino po yung nagkakalat ng maling information, we could go
Yes,
the
but what's the
diplomatic
legal
way.
recourse? What are our remedies? Saan tayo pupunta?
Well, Madam Chair,
Ang hirap naman na sasabihin sa mga pamilya na nawalan ng mga mahal sa buhay, na wala na tayong magawa, iyakan na lang natin.
hindi naman po ganun, Madam Chair.
Eh kaya
I
nga,
think
ano po ang sinasabi mo?
We should vigorously inform the public about any disinformation that is being made
Hindi, pero
by
wala
any
ba tayong
entity.
legal recourse dyan? Wala bang mapapataw na kaso ang Pilipinas na hindi naman tama ang ginawa nila?
This needs further study, Madam Chair. Of course, using
We do have legal remedies, don't we?
for sure, Madam Chair, but it is only
Assuming
now.
that this was true. I am not accusing anyone at this juncture, but certainly what we have heard is very substantial and very, very
Madam
serious.
Chair, thank you very much. If we knew what we know now, that this is a campaign,
Well, we do know what we know now.
this report by the Reuters, that there is actually
Kaya nga, anong magagawa?
maari po tayong gumawa po ng reply. That
Hindi, ang
this is
galing-galing
not,
natin gumawa ng note verbal. Hindi ba dapat mag-note verbal?
Opo. Note verbal is one way. That is the
Daan-daan na
diplomatic
ang
route.
ginagawa
but,
ng DFA, di ba? Hindi ba dapat iprotesta to?
Opo.
Hindi ba dapat mag-statement man lang yung DFA o DND? Hindi ba dapat magsalita ang pamahalaan natin na umalma? Bakit ito ginawa? Bakit biniktima ang libo-libong Pilipino?
Madam Chair,
Wala
if I
tayong
may-
palag eh.
if I
Ni
may-
hindi tayo umimik eh. Kiming-kimi tayo eh. Okay lang na pinatayan napakaraming Pilipino kung sakaling tama ito. Narinig natin ng mga doktor galing sa Amerika, doktor ng DOH, mga sikat tanyag, mga expert sa kanilang larangan. Bakit hindi tayo nakikinig?
Madam Chair, I believe that our country has also made representations sa ating mga
Wala pa akong
sa ibang bansa.
naririnig. Asan po yung
And
representation? Pahingi ng kopya, please.
And we could also go.
Yes, is that correct, Secretary Manalo? ASEC Tejada asserts that we have made representation,
Madam
whatever
Chair,
that means, in protest to these actions. Napakarami nating note verbal. Hindi ba dapat isulat man lang na hindi tama itong mga pangyayaring to?
Well, Madam Chair, the first time the DFA became aware of the situation was when the Reuters article came
Oo,
out.
sabay-sabay naman tayo. Pero mula noon, what has been done? I believe it's June 12, June 14, ano? Nasa 25 na po tayo. Have we taken any action, considered perhaps drafting something, somehow taking the cudgels for all those who died?
We have, in fact, when we heard of this article, we immediately thought of seeking information from the United States kasi doon lang namin nalaman to after we
So,
read the article.
have we received any response?
Could I ask our Assistant Secretary, American
Yes, please.
Affairs, because we did want to seek clarification on what exactly was this issue that we read about.
Please.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, and Senator Padilla. Yes, as the Secretary said, Madam Chair, immediately after the Reuters article came out, obviously we couldn't, do any official action yet on the basis of an article. So in response to your question about the note verbal,
But
but
the simple
definitely we reached
query-
out. Yes, we reached out immediately to the U.S. Embassy and to
In what form?
U.S. authorities through our regular consultations
Okay.
mechanism.
Has there been any
The-
reply forthcoming?
The initial response po was we were referred to the Department of Defense, and so we also got a copy of the statement that you had read into the
Yes,
record
there's a
this
defense
morning.
attaché, we all know him.
Opo.
Anong sagot?
Essentially, they are looking into the matter, and we have not received any official and formal response yet in terms of any confirmation, denial, or anything. So we are waiting on that. We continue to monitor and to ask for information.
Yes, but moving forward, we are all in agreement that some action needs to be taken, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. In fact, we have initiated the
So we're
the
counting
regular.
on both the DFA and now the DND, as mentioned by ASEC Chan Gonzaga, to help us get to the bottom of this, and if we have legal remedies, undertake them as
Yes,
quickly as
ma'am.
possible.
Basically, the DFA and our embassy in Washington, not the Department of National Defense here
Yes,
in
Secretary
the Philippines. po.
Diodoro.
No, it's the U.S. DOD that ASEC Chan Gonzaga was referring to, not the Department of National Defense of the Philippines. That's why
I thought he was referring to you, given that you are the counterpart.
No, Your Honor. He was referring to that's a diplomatic matter, even though involving a counterpart.
Even though it involves the counterpart
Yes,
department.
and that's probably
You're
more
certain of
proper.
that?
Yes, Your Honor. I am very certain. That's more properly within the purview of our diplomatic representation to the United States
Yes,
and the DFA.
Probably, but if you could help us along, because we would like to get to the bottom of this. Certainly your counterparts would have
DFA
better
requests us,
information.
Your Honor, we will certainly do.
DFA, please find it in your heart to request the Department of Defense. I don't know why we've suddenly become so officious, but let's do that. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will, of course, first wait for the reply from the DOD, the U.S. Department of Defense, and obviously if there's anything in their reply which would prompt us to seek the assistance of our counterparts.
Magtulungan naman tayo. Ang dami-daming nagkasakit ng malala, ang dami-daming Pilipino na namatay dahil dito. Hindi natin alam kung direktang ito, pero sa numero na lang makikita natin na talagang nakakasindak ang epekto nito. Kaya't siguro naman, all hands on deck naman tayo nito. Importante naman na matapos itong usaping ito. Ano? At kung kinakailangan, alamin natin kung may sala talaga at patawan ng karampatan parusa. Eto ngayon, which brings us, since DND got back into the fray, let us move on to a related matter, which was a report last year that the United States finally decided to release vaccines which the Philippines already paid for, only after President Duterte rescinded his decision to abrogate the VFA. So we're back to DND territory. Ambassador Romualdez, I believe you've been waiting, but you're muted. Babes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Romualdez. You were quoted as saying, then President Duterte, we need to give this VFA a chance because it will help us get our vaccines to our people. Does this mean that what ensued was a quid pro quo arrangement between the US and the Philippines? May kaliwaan bang nangyaring ganito? The vaccine, nabayad na natin, would only be delivered if the VFA remained untouched. It's a quote from your interview.
No, what I meant there was when what we had paid for was the Moderna, but the United States at that time was prepared to donate several vaccines or a number of vaccines to the Philippines and to other countries as well. But obviously, the priorities were the allies. We were an ally, but let's be very honest about it. The fact that there was there's no such thing as a free lunch, and the VFA was being dangled as by then President Duterte, that he was not sure he wanted to continue with it. He abrogated it at that time. So I pleaded with the president and told him that perhaps it would be best if we could just allow the VFA to continue, so that it will be much easier for us to be able to get the United States to give us the vaccines that we paid for, at the same time also get more vaccines down the road.
Yes, do you know a certain Haydarian? I think he was the one who interviewed you, and he said that you said, except Washington was holding back all their vaccines because President Biden back then wanted all Americans to get it first. But we had already paid for our Moderna vaccines. And to put it frankly, I basically begged the White House to give us the vaccines, to give people hope.
Well, like I said, there was already the executive order from the White House that President Biden said that all Americans will first get the vaccines before we start getting the vaccines out. Moderna,
but why was there a need for the good ambassador to beg the White House for the delivery of Moderna vaccines when we'd already paid for them?
But even if we had paid for them, the schedule was actually still much later on. What I did was to ask the White House if they could give us the vaccines earlier than that.
Did they come earlier? In fact, as I recall, they were quite seriously delayed.
It was the delay, but there was other vaccines that are actually given priority for the Philippines, and specifically that was Pfizer.
So why was Pfizer, which we did not pay for, in the Philippines before Moderna, which we had paid for? I'm lost.
Yeah, Pfizer had more
supply.
More supply, and they had it with the COVAX facility, which I'm sure our DOH is familiar with, that we were given, the donation came from the.
And what did the VFA, what did the mention of the VFA have to do with it?
Well, like I said, in diplomacy, as far as I'm concerned, I felt that if we had the VFA in place, which was in place at that time, we just had to continue with it. So it'll be much easier for us to be able to really ask our friends here in the United States. It will be much, perhaps more conducive for them to be able to give us the vaccines.
Is it correct then, Ambassador Romualdez, to say that aside from paying the purchase price, the Philippines also had to beg and promise to allow U.S. troops in the country before U.S. vaccines were released? This is the impression that your interview gives.
Well, what was meant there was the vaccines that were being donated is what we were after. The vaccines that we had paid for, Moderna had already made it clear that the vaccines will be coming at a certain time frame. and it was, well, as you said, it was delayed.
So, what connection did the VFA and the Moderna vaccines have, in your mind?
Well, there was no connection in that one. The connection was more on the donation, on having more of the vaccines available for us, and specifically that was Pfizer.
So you're saying that the VFA was related to the donation of Pfizer and had nothing to do with the already paid supply of Moderna?
No, it did not have anything to do with that one. It was more on the donations that were made available to countries all over the
But
world.
we paid for the Moderna. It's not a donation. Why did we have to
Yes.
agree to the VFA if we had already
Well,
paid for the medicine?
We did not agree to the VFA because of Moderna. We allowed the president had approved the VFA to continue because I told him that perhaps it would be much easier for us to get more of the Pfizer vaccines that were part of the COVAX
I see.
facility.
I see. Did anything or anyone in Washington imply that the VFA had something to do with the provision of U.S.-made vaccines to the Philippines? Where did you get the notion that they were perhaps tied together and that they would be friendlier and more ready to provide Western vaccines if the VFA remained in place?
Well, I could see that the priorities were given to countries that had obviously good relations with the United States. I mean, it's a very simple deduction, really, when you see that there are other countries that were given priority. And I wanted to be part of that priority at that time.
Yes, but you already said that Pfizer, being so widely available and being supplied much more efficiently, was all over the world. Are you saying that all over the world, every country with Pfizer was also required to host U.S. soldiers?
No. This was the earlier part when we were asking for the Pfizer, because at that time there was limited numbers, as you specifically said. President Biden said the priority will be first for Americans to receive the vaccines before they start exporting it. However, they also had donations that were being given. The United States government was donating vaccines to the USAID and other facilities, and also to the COVAX facility. And I wanted to be part of that priority.
And the priorities involved countries that hosted U.S. forces?
Not necessarily. I was just simply using that as a way of telling them that, look, we're going to continue with this. I hope that you'll give us, since we have and since 1951, we've had a mutual defense treaty. We've had the visiting forces agreement, which I'm sure President Duterte will perhaps continue with it. So these are the things that I used as a reason why we should be given priority like other countries close to the United States.
So it was just a usual inducement. Is that what you're saying?
Well, perhaps.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Romualdez, and of course to those in the United States online, most of all Dr. Lucy, as well as Professor Ong. Ambassador Romualdez, thank you very much. We're very grateful for your participation and your help in getting to the bottom of this report, and you are excused. Thank you very much. At this point, may I ask Mr. Attorney Talamayan of CICC regarding the Chinese cyber psyops here in the Philippines. Parang pinaglalaroan tayo ng lahat ng bansa. Up to this point, we are merely talking about American psyops. It is equally noteworthy, however, that the other player in the great power competition, China, has also been orchestrating or alleged to have been orchestrating illegal cyber operations in disinformation campaign, and that cyber attacks and hacking have been reported since January by DICT, clearly tracing the IP addresses to China. So DICT, Cybercrime Unit, would you like to comment on these reported hacking and attack incidents? I believe it's Attorney Talamayan po.
Good morning, Mr.
I see also that Attorney Lotok of NBI, are you with cybercrime? Are you with the cybercrime division? Maybe you'd like to add something after Attorney Talamayan. Oh, great. So, Attorney Talamayan, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the part of the CICC in monitoring the smear campaign by the Chinese government, Your Honor, we have been doing some analysis, and until now, Your Honor, because some of the IP address that has been mentioned in previous report of the CICC is located somewhere in China, and we cannot discount that this is just it was the Chinese government did it. At the moment, Your Honor,
So any other proof or evidence, or are there any other signs that these attacks were in fact state-sponsored, or at least state-sanctioned by the People's Republic?
we cannot say that, Your Honor, because the using VPN, Your Honor, the
Sorry.
virtual network.
Yes.
It goes to some countries, and some of the research by the CICC, Your Honor, there are some countries that this smear campaign that was posted online is located somewhere in China. Some is in other countries, Your Honor, because they're using VPN. So we cannot locate it, Your Honor.
Right, but aside from the IP addresses, any other trademarks, any other hallmarks of Chinese origin?
Your Honor,
Kasi nga iniikot-ikot. Pero maliban doon, wala nang ibang indikasyon?
there's no big indication, Your Honor, that the Chinese government is doing it, Your Honor.
Oh, okay,
But,
because that's the impression that your report, or at least the report of the cyber agencies released in February, parang ganon ang sinasabi.
Yes, Your Honor. The record that was released in February, Your Honor, it all goes to the Chinese government, Your Honor, that the Chinese has to do with it, all the campaign that going online, Your Honor. But until now, Your Honor, we cannot pin the ICC is still doing the deep research because of the tools that we have, Your Honor, is not that high-tech that we can pinpoint all throughout to the Chinese government, Your Honor. Only the analysis, Your Honor.
Okay, so after the February attack with the IP addresses suspiciously deriving from China, meron na naman kayong report noong 27 April, hindi ko alam kung DICT o nanggaling sa CICC o galing sa NBI, na nagsabi, recent massive spike in cyber misinformation against the Philippines from a website called Dark Reading. May alam po kayo tungkol dito? Kasi lumabas to sa dyaryo. Yes, please. DICT Director Reyes po.
Yes, ma'am.
Kayo yung nag-release nito, yung tungkol sa dark reading?
Hindi po, though we have also monitored some spikes relative to that one. So similarly, ma'am, we are working with the Cybercrime Investigation Coordination Center. So we trace most of the IP addresses that emanates from China as well.
Okay, is it true that cyber espionage activities in the Philippines have increased fourfold in the first quarter of 2024?
Actually, ma'am, we could not classify it if it's espionage. We are trying to look into breaches and incidents. And
yes,
we
but
have been
at least in terms of the hacking, in terms of the attacks on government sites.
Yes, ma'am. We have
Is
been.
it true that there's been a fourfold increase in said activity, in many cases using IP address that come from China, or having other proof that they derive from that country?
Yes, ma'am. For having it classified with as espionage, we have been reporting the incidents on a monthly basis through the National Cyber
pero
Interagency
tama na
Committee.
talagang times 4 na yung dagdag? Ganun ba kadami?
Yes, ma'am. Meron pong ganung spikes
Ganun
po.
talaga kadami?
Yes, ma'am.
Pero ang sinasabi niyong spike, ibig sabihin, babagsak ulit? Tapos tataas ulit?
Yes,
Ganun ba
ma'am.
yun?
There were instances, ma'am, when we have some incidents within the West Philippines Sea, medyo may spikes. After that one,
At
bababa.
tuwing may insidente sa West Philippine Sea, ganun?
Meron pong ganung trend, ma'am.
Yes, ang sabi, last year, this is going back a little bit, even if it's not cyber espionage, may sinasabi na yung Chinese hackers launched malware attacks on critical infrastructure bases in Guam. Is there any possibility or suspicion of that happening in the Philippines, given the rising tensions in the West Philippine Sea? This is an attack on the infrastructure bases in Guam. Yung malware na narinig natin?
We have been monitoring some malwares, ma'am,
Yes, that's
specifically
right.
with our
That's
government
why I'm
agencies.
asking. Is there any malware attack against our critical infrastructure? Similar to Guam's?
We have experienced, ma'am, so many. In fact, we have
So many?
we have been experiencing many, ma'am, malware attacks, although we have been preventing it. The reason for that, ma'am, we have already a connection with our government agencies. We have a National Security Operations Center wherein 28 government agencies are connected to us, and we have been monitoring them 24/7, ma'am.
So
we
what's
have been
being done to secure the country's critical infrastructure from malware and other digital attacks?
Yes, ma'am. We are recommending most, if not all, government agencies to connect to our National Security Operations Center to be monitored 24/7. If we have monitored such, we'll be informing them on such and we'll be investigating deeply.
So are the key agencies, for example, CAAP and so on, are our airports, our seaports, are they all part and parcel of your national security
The
operation?
CAAP, ma'am, I think is already connected to our National Security Operations Center as well.
PPA?
We'll give you, ma'am, the listings. We have 28 of them, ma'am, later, ma'am.
Have you actually caught any Chinese or other hacker group in the past 12 months or so? May nahuhuli ba tayo? Kasi maya't maya may report tungkol dito. Eh baka wala naman nahuhuli kahit kailan. Nakakaya naman tayo.
Yes, ma'am. The prosecution investigation, we pass it to the CICC, the National Bureau of Investigation, PNP, ma'am.
Ang galing mo magpasa, Director Reyes. Attorney Talamaya,
Actually, ma'am,
yung
it's not on
CICC,
per-value.
meron ba kayong nahuhuli? O
Yo-
di kaya nahabla?
Your Honor,
nakukulong?
the CICC don't have any power regarding the law enforcement, Your Honor.
Madam Chair, may I? The latest PAOK operations that resulted in the takeover of illegal cyber hubs in Bambantarlac and in Porac, Pampanga, have resulted in a treasure trove of figurative treasure trove of a lot of capabilities which are under the process of analysis.
So this has to do with cybersecurity or simply with POGO? The
It has,
treasure
we
trove?
are not assuming that, actually, ma'am, we hesitate to classify this as a POGO. Because this is not a POGO. They were involved in human trafficking.
But isn't that the very nature of POGO, that
No, ma'am,
criminal syndicates undertake international crime?
Actually, ma'am, I'd like to differentiate, if I can take the opportunity. POGOs are business process outsourcing that do not take bets anyway. But I think what happened was during the ban on gambling in China, they transferred operations
There's
here.
always been a ban in China.
Right. And when Macau was closed, they transferred here, and all sorts of things happened. Now, suffice it to state, ma'am, that I think
Ano
the...
pinagkaiba sa POGO?
No, a POGO is a pure business process outsourcing. For
Okay.
example, ma'am, off-track betting...
Anong suspicion ninyo dun sa Bamban at sa Porac?
Ay, hindi po, love scam na ho, scamming na eh.
Pero yung love scam, usong-uso yan sa NBI. Noong pa yan sina Vic Lorenzo, parating rin na-report yan.
No, love scam and other forms of illegal activities. And I really don't know if bet taking or gaming was
So hindi na
included.
siya POGO kasi hindi na
ma'am.
siya bet taking.
Hindi na, ma'am. And the equipment gathered is still in the process of being...
So it's a cybercrime hub.
Yes, ma'am.
Kung ano-anong scam na yan.
Definitely a
So
cybercrime hub.
there are no actual gambling machines, is that what you're saying?
No, ma'am. It's all electronic. And
No, but
text
most
blast machine.
gambling setups now are electronic.
I'm not too sure, ma'am. I'm not too sure about that. It's with the PAOK now. But I think I have information that all agencies are cooperating and analyzing this as to see what kind of activities these people were involved in.
So yung nahuhuli natin, hindi pa natin nahuhuli sa cyber talaga. Nahuhuli talaga sa physical.
Sa law enforcement operations,
And
ma'am.
law enforcement operations.
Yung cyber, ma'am,
Yung
is
sa
more
cyber, wala pa tayo
preventative.
nahuhuli sa dinami-daming report.
Preventative, ma'am. At least walang breach, walang DNS, walang denial of service na nangyayari. So, I mean, in that sense, parang bangko po, hindi nasasara yung ATM. Bagamat may reported na mga breaches, na ipapara
pero hindi
naman.
tumitigil. Kasi nag-times
Hindi po
4
talaga
na nga.
titigil yun, ma'am. Hindi
Pero
titigil.
nababawasan kapag takedown ka ng takedown.
Depende po sa sitwasyon. Katulad din naman po ng mga kumpanya, hindi po tumitigil talaga. Lumalaki lang ng lumalaki. Kasi po, pagkakakitaan nga, pwede
Oo nga.
pong ransomware. Kahit
Pero
po
yung tanong, lumalaki ng lumalaki, tayo ba lumalakas ng lumalakas ang kapabilidad na labanan
Well,
itong mga ito?
lumalakas po ang hindi lang po labanan, kung hindi po protektahan muna. Sa IT po natin, pinoprotektahan po natin ang information systems natin sa mga breach. Doon naman po sa remediation sa cyber, iba naman po sa DND, ibang usapan po yun, ay iba naman po ang role, no? Pero the important thing is...
I think there's a crossover because of the great fear of cyber terrorism.
Yes,
with the
ma'am.
malware attacking critical infrastructure. I think that's actually the great concern, at
Yes,
least
ma'am.
in this committee.
Agreed. So, ma'am, there are two approaches here. I think that the ICT will agree. Number one is there's a great campaign to improve our cyber hygiene, which is the weakest link of any any information technology system. For example, like a credit card scam. If you answer a phishing email, you're done for, no matter how robust your infrastructure is.
Pasok na.
The weakest link is the user.
Of course.
So, cyber hygiene, and secondly, is the resilience and redundancy of the systems. But there is a coordination mechanism, but in certain systems, we need to have some siloing.
So, ang totoo, we have a long way to go.
Because it costs a lot of money, actually.
That's correct. It's all engineering.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And cash.
Thank you. I think we've now completed the hearing, at least for this disinformation of the Pentagon. I will call for a 5-minute suspension. I think we've more or less covered all the issues. I call for a 5-minute suspension, and perhaps we can release the DOH at this juncture. Thank you very kindly for your active participation and the valuable information you've shared from the medical profession as well as from the area of public health. I will call for a 5-minute suspension, therefore, but the rest need to stay for the next item on the agenda, and this has to do with the Ayungin Shoal incident of June. So 5 minutes po, and we'll